We felt like Sam and Frodo, like walking across like the lands of Mordor to get to Mount Doom, just like at the bitter end of their journey, you know, just like trying to make it home.
Hey y'all, I'm Ryan Devlin and welcome to the Struggle Climbing Show, where I talk with elite climbers about their struggles and breakthroughs in training, nutrition, tactics, and mental game, and also what they're passionate about beyond the fight with gravity. Now today we're reconnecting with friend of the show and big wall badass, Jordan Cannon. Now this is Jordan's third appearance on the show, and for good reason, y'all. He just recently, along with partners Matt Segal and Jesse Huey, accomplished one of the most mind-blowing and impressive high-altitude ascents of the year, and really of the past handful of years, the ascent of Trango Nameless Tower via the Cowboy Direct Route, a grade 7, 513 big wall that reaches over 20,000 feet into the clouds of the Karakoram/Himalaya. Now this stunning line was first put up over the course of 60 days by a team led by Todd Skinner back in 1995, super famous first ascent, and then it was just recently repeated by Jordan, Matt, and Jesse, and that really highlights how cutting edge this climb was and still is. If you have ever wondered what it was like to put together an expedition of this magnitude, get clipped in for one hell of a ride. Jordan really brings his storytelling A-game here to the pod today, covering everything from how the trip came together, breaking down the costs of putting together something like this, acclimatization hacks, team dynamics, risk assessment, the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, assigning asterisks when it comes to high altitude big wall ascents, what happens to your body on an envelope-pushing adventure like this, and then Jordan answers perhaps the biggest question of all: why do it in the first place? And while 99% of us listening right now won't have the skill, the means, or even the desire to take on something of this magnitude, I personally found the struggles and joys and tactics and learnings and everything that Jordan shares today to be super relatable and also wildly, wildly inspiring. So coincidentally and delightfully, I was just out climbing with Jordan last week. As it turned out, he's here at the Red for a little bit, and we spent some time out on my fall project where I am psyched to report that I hit a new high point. I posted a reel on Instagram, and you can hear Jordan yelling up some support at me as my feet cut on the crux move, and then I somehow managed to hang on, get my Scarpa instincts back into those tiny little pockets for another few moves, before my arms then totally exploded. I still have a lot of work to do on that route. But man, I'm loving these instincts, y'all, on this steep, pockety climb, and I am so grateful that Scarpa is supporting the show as a sponsor. My very first pair of climbing shoes and approach shoes were Scarpas, and I've just been a massive fan of theirs ever since. And you know who else was climbing in Scarpas with me the other day? Well, today's Crusher guest, Jordan Cannon. So many incredible climbers trust Scarpa because they've been sustainably making the best footwear for climbers, trail runners, skiers, and hikers since 1938, y'all. And that sustainability call-out isn't just lip service, let me tell you. They are trailblazers in their commitment to sustainable production, carving a path for those of us who seek not only peak performance, but also a planet that'll be preserved to be explored for generations to come. I love my approach shoes. I love my climbing shoes. And I think you will too. You can shop the whole collection at Scarpa.com. Scarpa, no place too far. And this episode's also sponsored by patrons and subscribers of the show. Look, I know you probably already subscribe to like a million things, so do I. And maybe you're not sure if you can part with another $5 or whatever each month. I totally get it, which is why this month I'm hooking you up. You can access Patreon for free for 7 days to check out all the stuff that we've got going on up there. That'll give you access to 20 plus hours of exclusive content from the likes of Chris Sharma, Alex Honnold, Nina Williams, Ravioli Biceps, and today's guest, Jordan Cannon. If you like it, you can stick around and keep getting all that good bonus content that I put out every month. Or if you don't like it, or maybe you just don't have the cash to spare, that's cool. You can just cancel, and then you won't be charged anything as long as you cancel kind of before that trial period ends. But I hope you find value in it, as I'm working my harness off over here to crank out quality stuff each and every week to help you level up your training and your climbing, and maybe entertain you as well on the way to the crag or the gym, or when you're doing your laundry or dishes or whatever. If you're an iPhone person and you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can score a free trial there as well. So over on Patreon or in Apple subscriptions, it's free trial time. Thank you all so much for supporting me. If you can, I love you. All right, let's get ready to cowboy up with Jordan Cannon. You're looking very much like a young Steven Spielberg with this beard and the hair and the Raiders hat.
I'm not opposed to that look. That's a good compliment. Thank you.
I'm excited to catch up, man. It's good to see you.
Yeah, where are you? You look like you're not in a basement closet anymore.
It's the struggle flag. I'm still in the podcast/utility closet. I just got some fabric to hang behind me, and I got some lights. So now my face is lit because we're doing stuff on YouTube now. So I got to step up my game here.
I'm in a dark room, but I have the light coming in from outside. Can you see I'm finding my light?
See, just like a real old Hollywood talent. I feel like I know we're here to talk about Cowboy Direct and this incredible trip and accomplishment and life expanding journey that you went through. But for me, the story starts with the premiere of Indiana Jones. So I feel like we might just need to spend a couple minutes on that.
100%. I'm glad you brought that up.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm very glad you brought that up because the trip did kind of start with the Indiana Jones premiere, which I got to see a few days earlier because I was in France, which, yeah, thankfully that worked out to my benefit. Sometimes films come out later in Europe than they do in the US, but it came out on June 28th in France and on the 30th in the States. And I was afraid it was going to conflict with my Arc'teryx Academy event in Chamonix, and then Matt and Jesse, when they invited me on this trip, were trying to get me to bail on that event altogether, which I secretly told them that I just couldn't do based on prior obligations, but it was really because I would also miss the Indy premiere at the same time, and that was not a world in which I was willing to live in. So yeah, I got to see the film. I got to see the film in Chamonix, and then, yeah, just a few days later, start out on my expedition to Pakistan.
Dude, amazing. What a way to kick things off. What did you think of the movie?
I loved it, honestly. I can't believe the negative reviews it's gotten. I don't understand it at all. All of the true indie fans, even casual indie fans, some friends, I've seen it way too many times at this point and watched it with various friends, and they've all really enjoyed it. And it's very rare that a film makes me emotional or cry. It's not, I'll tear up maybe at a scene here and there, but to actually cry, like sob,
yeah,
that's never, I don't know if that's ever happened to me, but that movie got me big time.
Dude,
so
I love that. Me too.
I really enjoyed it. What did you think?
I've seen it twice in the theaters. I freaking loved it. It had all the fun, all the witty banter, all the vibe of indie. It had that beautiful ending. I was crying my eyes out. I mean,
yeah, okay, thank you.
It hit on every level. I mean, I saw it twice in the theater,
yeah,
which I almost never do. I got kids, I got jobs. I don't have time to see movies twice in the theater. I freaking loved it, man. I thought it was everything an indie movie is and should be. I loved it.
Totally agree. I was a little nervous when Spielberg dropped out as director, but I thought James Mangold did an incredible job. It was a great tribute to the old films, but unique in its own way, had his own personal touches on it. But yeah, like you said, it had all of the elements that make a classic indie film, and then some. Harrison totally brought so much emotion and like passion to the character that I did not expect. And yeah, just a iconic send-off to a classic character.
Well, what a great way for you to kick off your Indiana Jones adventure too. So your cup was full, your emotional indie cup was full, and just days later you tossed on your brown leather fedora and headed out to the Karakoram. But let's not start there if we can on this chat. I kind of want to understand a little bit more about this journey, because you and I keep in touch a bit, and this thing kind of seemed like it popped out of nowhere. It didn't seem like it had been something like all of a sudden you're like in some sort of hyperbolic sleeping tent, and I'm like, what the hell are you doing, man? He's like, well, I got this thing coming up. So maybe just give me like just a few minute lead in to how this incredible objective even hit your radar.
Yeah, well, first of all, the Trango Tower is a place I've always imagined going at some point in my climbing life. With who and when, that was completely unknown. I figured it would be a bit later on.
And just to kind of set the table on that, the Trango Tower is in Pakistan. It's part of the Karakoram range, right? I don't know. Maybe give me a 30-second primer on that. Not being very familiar with this type of terrain.
Yeah, the Trango Tower is in the Karakoram in northern Pakistan, kind of near the border of India and China, where there's a lot of border disputes and local fighting and whatnot. So it can be quite dangerous, and that was the one thing I was concerned about. But we had a great experience, and yeah, where we were seemed relatively safe. And yeah, I also learned, I'd always heard about the Karakoram, but I didn't really realize that it's essentially the same mountain range as the Himalaya. It's just a different name because it's in a different country. I guess they refer to those mountains as the Himalaya in India and Nepal, but then in Pakistan, for whatever reason, they call it the Karakoram. So I kind of had a realization, like when we arrived and started like hiking in and into the valley and on the glacier and seeing the mountains, I was like, oh shit. Like, we're literally in the biggest mountain range in the world. That's crazy. It didn't hit me until we were actually there.
The elevation.
It was like a smaller adjacent mountain or something.
Right. Like, you're already starting up high, right? Like, just hiking in.
Yeah, maybe like 10,000 feet or something.
Okay. All right. So, we've painted a bit of a picture here. So we're in essentially the Himalaya.
In Pakistan.
Right. You had said that this was something that had been on your radar, but maybe not this early. So why is that? And tell me about how this came in.
Yeah, because what makes the Trango Tower unique is that it's essentially an El Capitan-like formation. It's about 3,000 feet tall, but whereas El Cap is, you can walk to the top of El Cap if you wanted to, coming around the backside. But this is a freestanding, amazing tower, just 360 all the way around, steep faces to the top, with a little bit of snow and ice here and there, depending on the condition. And it's in a mountain range that's generally known for big snowy peaks, big high altitude mountaineering objectives. And of course, there's a lot of more high level alpine faces and things that require rock climbing skills as well. But this is pretty unique for the area being mostly a rock climbing objective. And so really the best way I could describe it is, imagine the environment that like K2 and G7 and Masherbrum and all these like epic big mountains in the Karakoram exist, with a freestanding tower that's like free climbing on El Cap. So
sick.
So for somebody like me that really likes Yosemite climbing and big wall climbing and big wall free climbing and granite, if you ever want to aspire to do anything like that outside of the valley, this is kind of like the one to do. And it's also has that reputation because when Todd Skinner and his team from Wyoming did the first free ascent of this mountain, it was the climb and the formation that ushered in big wall free climbing to the biggest mountains in the world, which hadn't quite been done yet. Big things had been climbed in Patagonia and elsewhere, but nothing at this level, at this scale and difficulty, also at high altitude.
And it had not been repeated since those guys put up that first ascent of Cowboy Direct.
Correct. And I think they did that in 1995. And I believe I have my timeline right, but the route that most people are familiar now, perhaps because the Huber brothers brought it into popularity, is the Eternal Flame.
Right.
And the Eternal Flame had been attempted by Wolfgang Gulich and team first, I believe, and that piqued people's interest in attempting to free climb the Trango Tower, but they were unsuccessful. They had freed most of it, but certain sections they weren't able to do. And so
Babsy just recently did that, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was the route that was attempted first as a free climb, but not completed. And then Todd and his team came and tried to find their own route and were able to free climb it successfully. And then years later, in the early 2000s, maybe 10 years later, is when the Huber brothers came back and completed the Eternal Flame as a free climb. And so at that point, early 2000s, there's two free routes. There's the Cowboy Direct and there's the Eternal Flame. And then until last year, neither of them had been repeated. The Eternal Flame had been attempted quite a bit, as I understand it, by a lot of good climbers that came away unsuccessful for whatever reason, mostly, I imagine, because of conditions and logistics and timing and all the things outside your control.
Right.
And yeah, so it was always kind of like who's gonna get the coveted second ascent after all these years. And Babsy and Jacopo did it last year, and followed by Edu Marin, and then us this year on the Cowboy Direct.
Hell yeah, dude! This is so exciting. It's such a mega adventure. I'm thrilled that we get to kind of dive in and understand beyond what one would typically get, which is maybe a short film or some Instagram posts. So thanks for taking the time to dive into this. Tell me about Matt and Jesse and how this objective came together from, where you were sitting, which was, I think, just planning on going out to Chamonix, doing your thing. Then you're back in Squamish. I mean, you're always traveling around. You're giving clinics. You're climbing big walls, but maybe hadn't planned on getting out to the Karakoram at this point in time. So why now?
Yeah, great question. Like you said earlier, it did kind of come up out of nowhere, because my overall plan for this year was to spend a decent amount of time training in the winter in Las Vegas to do some sport climbing in the Utah hills, kind of late winter, early spring. And
I thought you were training for your career as a professional hockey player, or maybe some semi-professional hockey player.
I was also doing that on the side. I was considering making the switch.
When I was out in Vegas this winter, we didn't go climbing, but we did beat up at the ice rink. So you were wearing a couple different hats there, or helmets, as it were. But I digress. So you were playing some hockey, and you were training. You were doing a lot of, it seemed like, kind of moonboard sport training, that kind of thing, getting stronger.
Yeah.
And planning on some of the kind of the typical objectives for this year. Is that right?
Totally. Yeah. Just some sport climbing, real training goals, essentially. And then my hope was to go to Yosemite after that for my usual big wall season. I had a lot of things I wanted to do there. And then after that, I was going to go to Chamonix for another Arc'teryx event, and then spend the summer sport climbing in Europe. And that was it was basically my year. And then the weather this year, most places in the country, was not great. And so was forced to kind of adapt. And I spent a lot of time in the gym. I was like, okay, well, I'll just start looking forward to training for Yosemite. And then a few days later, a friend of mine who lives in Reno and has a cabin in Yosemite went there and saw the state of it and how wet it was, and was like, called me up, and he's, dude, sorry to say, but I would not plan on climbing in Yosemite at all this spring.
Wow.
El Cap is literally a waterfall, a wet blanket. Like, El Cap Meadow is flooded. All the roads are shut down. It's just not good.
Yeah.
And so when I heard that news, I was like, well, fuck, okay. I was really at a low point, because I didn't know what I was climbing or training for. And then just around that same time, maybe a few days later, Matt and Jesse both gave me a call. I had 2 missed calls from Matt and Jesse in the same day, which doesn't happen that often. So I knew that something was up. I figured they were gonna ask me to go on some kind of trip with them. So yeah, what was going through my mind when they asked me, kind of first of all, was, I mean, I was kind of shocked to get the call, but I was honored to be considered as a good potential partner for their project. But then I was like a little stressed by how last minute it was, and the fact that I would have to cancel on my friend who I was planning to go sport climbing with in Europe. And then just the trade-off. I'm like, man, casual sport climbing, waking up at 11 and going up to Sayus and eating baguettes and all that, versus going on a 6-week trip to Pakistan where there's the potential to get dysentery and be shitting your brains out in your tent while it snows outside for 4 weeks and not climb anything,
Right.
And have to do a lot of work and effort and money and potentially get nothing in return. So that was kind of my initial reaction. But then as I sat with it for a few days and I chatted to some friends whose opinion and advice I trusted, I started to realize that this kind of opportunity doesn't come around all too often, especially with two people that I know I would get along with well and have a really good time, and to have a ton of experience going on these kinds of trips, because it's not easy to put. I would not have been able to put this kind of thing together by myself. Yeah, then I started to think about the risk, because I had dabbled to get into alpine climbing again last summer in Chamonix, after avoiding it for many years because I was just essentially like too worried about the risk of it. Yeah, I was like ultimately not that psyched. And so I was like, fuck, okay. I was like not planning to do any alpine climbing this summer. And now this is like the most alpine thing I might ever do. Yeah. And I had to kind of weigh that. And what they told me is that ultimately the most dangerous part of this objective was the approach. There's about a 4,000 foot approach gully that's really just a huge drainage system of loose rock falling from formations all around, with the Trango Tower sitting right at the top of it. There's a little bit of snow and ice to get to the base. And everybody we had talked to that has been there has said it's, the death gully, like the worst gully they've ever hiked. And it's super loose and it sucks and it's scary and near misses and things like that. And so, but they said as soon as we get to the actual route, it's relatively safe, about as safe as climbing El Cap, maybe a little less, because there's some snow and ice up there, and more loose rock, I would say, than El Cap, but still.
Sure. Is it mixed climbing at all, or it's just kind of mixed on the approach, but once you get onto the head wall, you're climbing granite straight up for a few thousand?
It does depend on the condition that you find the route in. I'd say at the top there's about 5 pitches of mixed climbing no matter what. But then below that, the wall is steep enough that if you get it in good condition, you're like rock climbing 95% of it.
Cool.
When we got to the route initially, it was like after a storm, and so it was more alpine than it would have been, and ended up being later on. So like the first 10 pitches were kind of snowy and wet and had some ice here and there, and yeah, we're climbing some of them mixed, some of them free, some of them aid. But then when we actually went back to free climb the route, that was all totally gone and dry. So yeah, mostly rock. And so I don't think it mattered that I didn't have that much experience with that kind of stuff, because that was my next thing. I'm like, am I qualified for this kind of thing? I'm like, I haven't done any ice climbing ever. But that's another thing with somebody like, with a team of 3, Jesse has the most alpine experience, the most ice climbing experience, and mixed climbing. Matt has been climbing with Jesse the past few years to up his skills in those as well. And so Jesse was on the docket to lead all the alpine stuff. Matt was second in line if needed, and then I was third, which there was a very unlikely possibility that I'd have to lead any of that stuff. So they're like, with your ability and our guidance, we can get you up any of that stuff. So
and the reason I'm assuming that you were the first call that they made when the spot opened up on the team was just your big wall tactics on granite, moving fast, your systems, being able to put quite a bit of vertical feet below you in a short amount of time, and just you're a very, very strong vertical granite climber. Is that safe to say that they were looking for expertise in that? Obviously not on the mixed stuff or the ice stuff. They brought some skill on that, but once getting onto the head wall itself, getting the systems in place to move efficiently and confidently through what are, I'm sure, some pretty challenging pitches, that's where you brought a high level of expertise to the team.
Yeah, I think so. I think first and foremost, us being friends and them knowing that they get along with me enough to imagine being on a trip with me for 6 weeks. I think that was the first thing. But then, yeah, the big wall climbing experience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like the allure, the adventure of being able to take on something like this, and just the opportunity, which probably doesn't come around all that often, was enough for you to say, hell yeah, let's just jump in.
Pretty much. It was actually talking to Alex Honnold. He was the one that really got me fired up. Everybody else had kind of just tried to help me talk through all of the pros and cons and come to this decision by myself. And you know how Alex, he can just be so blunt sometimes. Like I called him, I was like, hey, like Matt and Jesse invited me to Pakistan. I don't know if I should go. He was just like interrupting me. He's no, like you're going, like you gotta, like there's no question. Like you have to say yes.
Right.
they're a great team. You guys will have a ton of fun. These kinds of trips don't happen often. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it's going to be the coolest thing you do this year, and it'll be totally life changing. So basically I got off the phone with him after he told me that, and that was all that I needed to hear. I think I would have ultimately come to that decision myself, perhaps not as quickly. So yeah, I just texted Matt and Jesse, and he was just like, I'm in.
Sick.
All caps. Not really knowing what that meant or how much it was going to cost or whatever.
Right.
I was just like, I'll figure all that stuff out.
The psych was there, and Alex, of course, had similar experiences. But there was a time when he hadn't done any alpine whatsoever, and Conrad reached out to him, or somebody said, "Hey, let's jump in on this." And you just sometimes you're faced with this. There's quite a bit of fear and certainly a high level of unknown. But if you jump in, it can really expand you as a human, but also your skill set as a professional climber, which is what you do. So I'm excited to dive in. Now you've committed, you're in, you're probably cramming, right? It's like a college final. You're trying to prepare yourself physically and mentally. And I know at least a little bit about that because you've posted some things on your Instagram, like sleeping in the tent, like the oxygen deprivation tent and these kinds of things. So give me a little bit of just like the run up there. Where did you focus your limited time to prepare? I mean, what was it? A month? 2 months?
It was 2 months, I think.
Okay.
Maybe a little less. And they say that you want to be in the hypoxia tent use it for 6 weeks and spend like 10 to 12 hours in it a day at night. And you might only be sleeping for 8 hours. But I would try and go in there early and read a book or have my computer and whatnot. And then when I wake up, the same thing, stay in it a little longer.
Right.
And let me just tell you, the tent fucking sucks. Like it like screwed up my whole scene because it's one thing to just be at high altitude and struggle breathing a little bit. Say you go camping at like the Hulk or whatever in California, right, which is like 11,000 feet. But you're like in the mountains and it's cold and yeah, you're sleeping in a tent, and you can't breathe as well, but like it's relatively comfortable. The tent is so hot. Like not only can you not breathe, but it's also really hot and stuffy. Like I would just put the tent on my bed and then just get in there in my boxers and just like sweat it out all night, like not being able to breathe. Like it was really hard to sleep. Not just because of the lack of oxygen, but just because of the level of comfort in there.
Right.
And so it's really hard to be doing this much volume. Like I would play hockey in the morning, then I'd go to the gym, and then I'd go to Red Rocks in the afternoon and climb until sunset when it's not as hot and the routes are shaded. And then I'd do that 5 days a week. And then when you're trying to spend 10 to 12 hours in this tent, and I'm wearing my Whoop and it's tracking my sleep and things, and it's telling me I'm in there for like 12 hours. Yeah, mentally it was a little challenging because my mindset going in was I think I want to be like as rested, not only as fit as possible, but as rested as possible going into a trip like this, sure, knowing that it's going to take all of our energy essentially. And so I just had to eventually kind of just go with it and be okay with being tired all the time. And ultimately I do think it was good training because I mean, that's essentially the idea, is that, you're suffering a little bit more beforehand to free yourself up some time when you actually get there. Because had we not used those tents, we would have likely had to pushed to higher altitude like much slower. And that takes time. They say like climb high, sleep low, and kind of work your way up and down slowly higher as you let your body adjust. So we do think the tents helped, but there was a lot of suffering beforehand, which is a stressful time as you're trying to prepare, not only with physically, but with all of the gear and logistics and things that need to be taken care of before you can show up in Pakistan ready to go.
Yeah, for sure. Well, obviously we know the ending worked out quite well, but you never know when you're in it if what you're doing is right and is your focus being put on the right things and these kinds of things. But let's fast forward a little bit into Pakistan. You've put some great stories in videos on your Instagram. So anybody who's listening, I just direct you over there, but also to Matt and Jesse's Instagrams. They've posted some fantastic photos, videos, and also some beautifully written essays about this time. And so one of the things that we'll skip past for purposes of time here unless there's anything that you specifically want to highlight, and that's totally fine. But essentially, your time in Pakistan, going to the markets, getting pre-climb shaves, getting kitted out with local garb, what appeared to be perhaps the most heinous car ride I've ever seen as you were on your transportation out to get the climb started and puking your brains out from car sickness and these kinds of things, all documented very well on your Instagram. So I'll direct anybody to that. But I'd love to dive into the climb and the experience of the climb and, of course, the approach through that gully if you're ready. But if there's anything that I just kind of glossed past, because that was a few weeks of stuff that I just kind of covered in about 30 seconds of saying people should check out your Instagram, feel free to highlight anything there, and then let's dive into the climb.
Yeah, go check that out. And then I'll speak a little bit to my experience going into it. Like this is where I was really naive, but could kind of just rely on Matt and Jesse's preparation, mostly Matt's, because he put together a ton of the logistics and coordinating with the guide service that we hired to outfit us for the entire expedition. And so for those that are interested, what that actually looks like is we flew into Islamabad in northern Pakistan. We arrived at 1 a.m. or something. Somebody picked us up from the airport with all of our bags, and we had an insane amount of baggage. Like we each had five bags in total. And I got utterly screwed flying to Europe first because I had to check my bags twice. I paid like over $3,000 in baggage fees.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that really made me upset. I basically went into the trip like with no money left. I was like, all right, well, I just spent everything I had for this trip, and we'll just nothing I can do now. Just got to go with it. Well, that'll sort itself out on the back end.
Can we just pause there for a second? Because I think it is, maybe people, I certainly don't know how all this works. You have sponsors, but you also pay for some of this stuff yourself. And these big expeditions, I'm assuming, are quite expensive, where you're talking about having guides and just the flights, the gear, the logistics, the amount of time that you're out there, the food that you need, any permits that are needed, all of this kind of thing, I'm sure is really expensive. Can you give a sense for what the cost of something like this is and how much is funded personally versus by the sponsors versus do you set up a GoFundMe for family to help you out? Like, how do you make these life-changing adventures happen?
Yeah, you essentially have to be really rich to be able to fund an entire trip like this on your own. Otherwise, you're pretty reliant on sponsors or personal savings.
Right.
It takes a bit of hustling. So since it was Matt and Jesse were more prepared because they were planning on this like the whole year, and I was not. I got brought in really last minute, and I had essentially used up all of my travel budgets with all of my sponsors for the year.
Right.
And so I didn't really have. Usually, you have a pool of money that you can tap into for specific trips, but yeah, like I said, I had spent my travel budget for the year and wasn't able to get additional funding from my sponsors. I was able to get a little bit from one, Jesse and I both, but yeah, for the most part, I was paying for the trip essentially by myself. But but I also make a living from the money that these companies pay me. So people are like, "Oh, is Arc'teryx paying for that?" I'm like, "Well, I'm paying for it with the money that they pay me." So
Right.
Not really. It's not a separate thing. Sometimes it is, but in this case, it wasn't. So yeah. So I essentially paid for it myself, but had a little bit of help on the front end, considering that I was going to Chamonix for an Arc'teryx event. So they were able to pay for some of my baggage fees and some of my flight as they would if I was flying there and coming home.
Got it.
Wow. But yeah, I mean, the plane ticket is like $3,000. My baggage fee was like $1,000 to get to France, and then $2,000 to get to Pakistan, and then the main expense. I mean, you have, depending on how much gear you already have, and if you have to buy any yourself, or if you're able to get gear from sponsors, that can be a big expense. The main one is food, because you have to show up essentially with all of your food that you're gonna need for your objective, and not like for your entire stay there, because the guide service or the outfitter that you work with that helps support your whole and put together your whole expeditions with your visa and everything that like the government needs and your permit to go climb the mountain and be in this part of Pakistan and all that. But they also put together for you a cook and an assistant cook and a guide to deal with to lead you like to base camp essentially and work with all of the other Pakistani people. They arrange the person to pick you up from the airport. They set up the hotels that you're going to stay in transit. They set up the Jeep drive that takes you to the last town. They set up the porters, the guys with the horses and the mules to help carry your stuff into base camp and all of these logistics in and out. And so that's what Matt was coordinating with. I think our guide service was called Pakistan Higher Ground. This guy, Gafoor, he's done expeditions with all of our friends, with Micah Dash and Hayden Kennedy and Josh Wharton. He's kind of like the go-to for American expeditions, and he's really awesome. He's been doing it for a long time. So for that, and as long as you're hiking and you're camping on the way into base camp, and if you're in base camp, like the food is provided for you.
Right.
But if we're at advanced base camp and beyond and we're up on the mountain, we're by ourselves, we're away from our support team, then we have to have all of that food. So bars and coffee and breakfasts and drink mixes and protein powders and freeze-dried meals and salami and candy, like whatever you want up there, you have to think about that beforehand and you have to bring it.
Got it.
And so thank God that Matt and I basically just brought Fizz Advantage for the whole team. I just had a duffel bag full of Fizz Advantage products.
Yes.
Which they were kind enough to give not only to me, but Matt and Jesse as well. And then they brought all of the food. And they had 3 duffel bags full of food or something. It was ridiculous. And that, I don't think I would have been able to do that by myself. It's hard to estimate how much you're going to need.
And Matt's a bit of a foodie and also has Alpine Start, right? So you had your caffeine covered and you had probably some pretty good meals ready to go when you hit that wall.
We did. So that whole guide service, all those things I just described, that costs, and it's kind of nice to just pay like a flat rate and have all of these things covered on the front end, and then a little bit of tipping on the back end of the trip. But how much was that? That's like $6,000 or something.
So yeah, you're deep into the $10,000+ when you're talking about flights, gear, food, guide, the outfitters, and things that you're buying there, and all of this. So to your point, you need to have help, or you need to be rich, or you need to have really big sponsors. And you dug deep, it sounds like, personally to make this happen, but it's a once in a lifetime experience. I'm assuming it was worth it. No, just
it was totally worth it. No, my attitude for that kind of things is I prioritize living my life in the moment and saying yes to once in a lifetime opportunities, even if it means that I have less money and less security in the meantime. I'd rather, like going to the Stanley Cup final, for example. I was in Boulder with Matt and Jesse, finishing up my climbing class that I taught last year and meeting with them to prep logistics. And then the Golden Knights won Game 4 and were looking like they had the opportunity to close out and win the Stanley Cup final at home in Game 5. And I was like, tickets were on sale. I was like, fuck, I could go. That would be amazing. And I was really stressed about it and considering not. And I eventually was just like, fuck it. I'm going to pull the plug and I'm going to go. And I was really happy that I did, because it was like a totally life-changing experience for me and gave me a ton of motivation and inspiration going into this trip.
Man, this is the year of canon. We're talking about Indiana Jones. We're talking about Stanley Cups. We're talking about Cowboy Direct. Man, it's just you're living that life, dude. I'm loving it. Okay, good. Well, let's now dive into the climb.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the timeline. This will help explain it. We fly to Islamabad day 1. Day 2, we fly to Skardu, which is a small town at the foothill of the mountains. It'd kind of be like if you were to fly into Denver or something from the Middle East and then catch a short flight to like Big Bear or Fresno and then go up into the mountains kind of thing. And so yeah, we fly to this town called Skardu, where a lot of expeditions start, primarily for K2 in the surrounding mountains. And a lot of people also just go there to trek and sightsee and hike around the valleys and look at these big mountains, cool. Not necessarily to climb anything. So yeah, Skardu's a bustling town. Yeah, I mean, Islamabad is crazy as well, but Skardu is where you get on the Jeep the following day, day 3, and take a 6-hour Jeep drive up to this town called Ascoli, which is like this last town where the road ends, and you have to start hiking up into the valley by foot, and then it's a 3-day hike in to get to base camp. And base camp is at 13,300 feet, and you maybe start around like 10 or 11,000 feet. And the first 2 days of walking are like totally mellow, to be honest. I was like thinking it was going to get hard right off the beginning, but you're kind of just walking up like a mostly flat trail along this river going up this valley for 2 days and camping along the way. And they're setting up a cook tent and a mess tent, and we have our own personal tents we set up, but they're like making food and breakfast for us, and it's awesome. We had a really cool team of people. And then the last day, and it was all cloudy and overcast, so we couldn't really see anything, but it made the hiking conditions nice. Like I was still in shorts and a t-shirt, because otherwise it would be like deathly hot, like you're hiking with an umbrella, like to create shade for yourself kind of thing.
Right.
But then on the third day is where you hit the glacier, and then you turn into a different valley, like where the Trango Tower is. And so day 3 is where things actually started to get, day 3 of hiking is where things started to get interesting. And that's where I had the realization. I was like, oh shit, like we're like in the biggest mountain range in the world. It's starting to get really epic. And then we get our first sight of Trango Tower, and then we make it to base camp and everything, where is essentially going to be our home for the next 4 or 5 weeks. And so yeah, day 3 is where things start to get a little more challenging, but also way more interesting. And so yeah, it took us a week to get to base camp, which is really fast compared to certain expeditions. It's not uncommon to have bad weather when you arrive in Islamabad and you're trying to get to Skardu. And because that flight only runs like a few times a week, and it's a small plane, and if the weather is bad, it gets canceled all the time. So there is the possibility that you get stuck in Islamabad for a number of days, and then that delays your time making it to base camp. So we had no problems. We had a great travel sequence getting to base camp. And then the weather like dramatically improved. Our first morning in base camp, like bluebird splitter, amazing weather, and it was looking like it was going to be like that for a number of days. And so
Sick.
we kind of like hit the ground running. We're like, all right, we got to get up early. We got to pack all of our bags. We got to hike all this gear up, and we got to get things in motion. So it was pretty exciting that first day. But yeah, what we were kind of looking at is the 4,000 foot approach to the base of the wall. And our first objective was just get all of our stuff to the base as much as we could. And the gully really didn't look that bad from below, but it's way bigger than it looks. You don't start climbing where the gully hits the wall. You actually have to keep going up like another 1,000 feet through this notch and then over on the other side. So from base camp, you can't even really see the route that we're climbing.
Right.
It was kind of out of view. And so, yeah, I was thinking like that day we packed up and left base camp, I was thinking we were going to be at the base of the wall in a few hours. And then it took us like 4 hours to get just to advanced base camp, which is only 2/3 of the way there. And we were totally cooked because we're leaving base camp at 13,300 feet, right? And then we're carrying like 50 to 60 pound packs, and we're going above, for me at least, the highest altitude I've ever been at, which is like Mount Whitney, like 14.5 or something.
Right.
And so, yeah, we started off strong purely because of a psych, I think, but then our bodies could only do so much, and we kind of slowly just suffered our way to advanced base camp, and we spent the night there. And advanced base camp is like 16,500 feet.
Wow.
And so that's where we're starting to feel the altitude, and we're struggling to sleep that first night. So it was slow progress. It was a lot harder than we expected, a lot farther than we expected. Altitude,
and this is just the three of you at this point in time. Your support team was back before the gully.
Yeah. So they stayed at base camp.
Got it.
And I'll just give you a picture. Out of the entire time that we were actually at the mountain, we only spent 5 days in base camp. The rest of the time we were on the wall.
Wow.
Which that alone signifies a successful expedition, in my opinion, because that shows how much we were actually able to like be out in the mountains doing something.
Yeah, you got lucky. Sometimes you could spend 3-4 weeks waiting for a weather window, just playing cards and sitting in base camp. So the fact that you were able to hustle out to the wall that quickly is incredibly fortunate. So,
Exactly.
okay. So now you're out at Advanced Base Camp, and
Also known as ABC. You'll hear us refer to that.
great. Okay, that's helpful. I love acronyms here at the Struggle. So you're at ABC. How do you take a look at breaking up Cowboy Direct? And give us a little bit of an overview because it's 30 some pitches, right?
Yeah, 30 some pitches. The hardest has one pitch of 513, and then a bunch of pitches of 512, 512 plus crack climbing, and then a few, some pitches of 510, 511, whatnot.
Pretty consistent though. You're in the 12s and it spikes up to the 13, but it's on you. There isn't 20 pitches of 5.9 and then you have a couple hard pitches.
Yeah. So we acquired as much information as we could to come up with a strategy, but it was kind of constantly changing as we were actually there and seeing things firsthand and things meeting or not meeting our expectations and having to adapt. It's kind of a lot of readjusting of what our plan was. But basically the wall breaks down into 3 parts, 2 camps splitting the 3 parts. So like at 1/3 height, about 10 pitches up, very similar to El Cap, there's a ledge called Sun Terrace or Shoulder Camp, which is kind of like being at Mammoth Terrace on El Cap at the top of the Free Blast. And actually our route, like it's called the Slovenian route. It's the first 10 pitches of the Cowboy Direct and the Eternal Flame, like they share the same start to this ledge and then they break off from each other.
Cool.
Very similar to El Cap if you were climbing climbing a route up to Mammoth Terrace, and then a lot of routes break off from there.
Right.
So it was kind of like we had a 10 pitch free blast basically to get to this ledge where we were going to set up camp. And it's the kind of ledge, like it's a terrace really. It's not even appropriate to call it a ledge. It's like big enough it's at the top of this shoulder on this ridge where you can set up a tent and walk around and you don't have to like have lines strung up where you need to keep your harness on and clip in and all that stuff.
Cool.
So it's pretty comfy camp, and there's a bunch of snow up there and whatnot, and that's like a popular camp for a lot of those routes. So, and then the next camp about another third of the way up the mountain is called Hanging Camp or Pyramid Camp on the topo as well. And that's like proper big wall, portaledge, hanging style camp. And then from there to the top, there's not really any other place to reasonably camp. And so our primary objective starting out was to basically climb to these 2 camps, leave our gear and set up, figure out some of the pitches of the route, come down and rest, and then go up and try and free climb it from the ground. Because the style of climbing this wall differs from, say, like a ground up free ascent of El Cap is like you're not just climbing, you're not just showing up at the base with your portaledge and your haul bags, like climbing however many pitches you climb that day and then like setting up camp.
Why not?
Because you need to have a lot of food and water, and hauling that much water up doesn't make sense when there are like these certain ledges with snow. So basically to get water, we needed big enough ledge that has snow that we can melt to get our drinking water and our cooking water. But then the second thing is the weather windows. It's very rare that there's a window long enough to be able to climb it in that style. And I'd say Babsy and Jacopo's ascent is kind of like the only one, and maybe the Huber brothers ascent. Every other free ascent has been epically long and endured long storms. And so kind of knowing that we were going to have to do that at some point, our idea was like, if we have these 2 camps set up with fixed lines going to the ground, we can easily retreat back to camp if there's a storm and then continue on climbing the following day.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So you're essentially, as you're doing that, you're also being able to suss out the pitches, who's going to take lead on which one, and as you're climbing those first times up, you're aiding them, I'm assuming, for speed, or are you trying to free them?
We're kind of climbing by any means, free if it made sense, but really like goal number 1 is just to get our shit up there.
Right.
And figure out where the route goes. And figuring that out wasn't super easy. Like the topo we had, like for the actual Cowboy Direct section, like from Sun Terrace to the top was very detailed. But for like the Slovenian route, all it said was like 10 pitches, 511, and showed some bolted anchors. That was all the information. That was like all the information we had. It doesn't say start at this crack system, like nothing like that.
Right.
So it was less obvious than you would expect, and slower going, just trying to figure out where it all goes. When you see it, it makes total sense. You're like, oh yeah, of course it goes there and then there. But upon arrival, we were the first ones there and was not obvious at all. So yeah, our goal was just to get that up there. And as a party of 3, like I kind of realized early on, it's easier for me to get into big wall mode where I'm just like working and managing the anchors and the ropes and fixing lines and hauling and all that, as opposed to like, all right, Jesse, you lead this pitch and then I'll lead that. I kind of realized, I was like, I don't care. We're not trying to free climb yet. I was like, Jesse, you lead us all the way to Sun Terrace and I'll just manage all of the fixing of the ropes and the hauling of the bags and all that stuff. So that was our strategy. Set up camp on Hanging Terrace. On Hanging Camp and set up camp on Sun Terrace and fix lines from there to the ground, ideally, so that then we can rest, come back up, free climb to our high point, and then stay at Hanging Camp and push to the summit.
Right.
I find these helpful. I'll give another LCAP equivalent is if you basically fixed ropes from the ground of the free rider all the way up to the alcove, and then stayed in the alcove and maybe pushed whatever ropes you had a little higher until you were within blasting distance of the summit. But then you can't just hike off. You have to rappel down and clean all your stuff. So yeah, that was our strategy. And we did not do that in our first mission. That took 3 missions to be able to do all of that work, because that's a lot of gear to hike up. That's a lot of rope to hike up, a lot of food and multiple sleeping bags and tents and portal edges and stoves and clothes and climbing gear, all this shit. So that took us 3 separate outings. The first outing was we planned for a few days, but then we ended up being there for like 6 days or something because the weather was so good. And then we came down and we rested in base camp for a day or 2, and then we went up again, came down another time. Yeah, so essentially like a couple weeks of just like straight up work.
Yeah, how did you feel, and how did the other guys feel? Like, now you've put in a few weeks, you've eaten some different foods, you're at an altitude you've never been at, you're working really hard, you haven't, to your point, even begun the push to do the hard climbing. What's your state of mind? Give me a snapshot of where things are at now as you're almost getting ready to actually start the thing.
Yeah, well, first of all, we didn't get sick, which is great. A lot of people get sick in town on their way into the mountains or on the first few days of hiking to base camp. And our cooks and our guide were awesome. They took immense care in the way that they prepared and cleaned the food and boiled the water and everything. And honestly, that they're like the unsung heroes, because had one of us, we barely squeaked out this climb with the amount of time that we had and all the things considered. And if one of us had gotten sick, that could have pushed us a day back, and then we wouldn't have summited or something like that. So the fact that we didn't get sick is huge. And there were 3 other expeditions at Trango this year, aside from our own. We were the first ones there, the last ones out, but all of them got sick and we did not. And so
wow.
that was huge. None of us got altitude sickness or had like severe symptoms that we had to go down. I woke up one morning on Sun Terrace and felt really bad and threw up once, but then we went down later that afternoon and it was all good. But I don't want to say like we were thriving up there. We were all just waking up, just being like, oh, fuck, dude, I feel awful. And going to bed at night, just being like, who's got the ibuprofen? Who's got the Diamox? Drinking tons of like hot noons and just trying to stay hydrated. Because, yeah, generally just not feeling that good. I don't want to, but you just get used to it, I guess. Like your baseline of how good you feel, it just changes to the conditions and the environment. But as we finished all of as much work as we could, we didn't actually succeed in getting to Hanging Camp and fixing ropes up there. We got 3 pitches up to the base of the crux before we were down in base camp, hoping to be able to do one more mission to complete the rest of our work that we had hoped to do. And the weather was bad and it stayed bad, and we kind of wasted away some days, and looked at our schedule with, all right, we have to leave base camp on this day to catch our flight from Islamabad, a week later, and yada yada. So we kind of like did the math, and we're like, all right, we basically have a 2-week window to make this happen. So I remember Jesse coming in the tent, and he was like, all right, boys, this is the time that we decide whether or not we want to be like big mountain men. We can choose to sit here in our tents and wait for the weather to get better and have a shorter window and potentially still be able to pull it off, or we got to go up now and just know that we're going to suffer a little longer in bad weather. And so that's what we decided to do. We kind of knew that was a possibility going in. Like I said, all the other parties who have free climbed this wall have generally had to endure some epic storms. So it's kind of a bit of a rite of passage, I guess. So we hustled up there. We had one good day of weather where we were able to free climb up to Sun Terrace. Okay, so cool. Like 10 pitches up, free blast, third of the wall. And then the following day we were able to free climb up to our high point, 3 pitches of 511, the first pitches of the Cowboy Direct, to the base of the 513, and then the weather shit on us, and we spent the whole next day in our tents in the snow, just like watching Netflix on our iPads and reading books and sleeping and whatnot. And then I'd say for like another few days, like I mean, it felt like a week almost. Maybe it was like 5 days where the weather wasn't bad all day, but it would either be you wake up in the morning in a snowstorm, in a cloud, thinking like, all right, there's no way we're going to rock climb today. And then miraculously, like the sun would come out and the storm would split, and we'd get like a few hours where we were able to climb like a pitch, or like maybe Jesse was able to free this pitch and Matt and I weren't able to try because then a storm came in and we had to bail back to camp. Right. It's like very minuscule progress, maybe a pitch, maybe a few pitches, maybe just a pitch up, getting the rope up on this pitch and not even free climbing it, having to come back and free climb it the next day or whatever. Very slow progress. And it was very hard to motivate each day because it took a lot of effort to get out of like our camp attire, fold down jackets and gloves and everything, and get into our mountain boots and our climbing pants and like transition into climbing mode. But where from Sun Terrace, where the Eternal Flame essentially starts right off of Sun Terrace, the Cowboy Direct traverses like this 300-meter snow slope. It's like, I don't know, it's pretty steep snow slope, but like around to the other shoulder of the mountain. And you lose about like 400 feet of elevation, something in the process. And so just to get from Sun Terrace to the start of the Cowboy Direct, where our fixed lines were, and like jug up and keep climbing to make progress, took like a serious amount of effort. And we have to go over there with all of our food and water and clothes and climbing gear for the day. Right. And then coming back that snow slope at the end of the day was always grueling. So it took a lot of effort for us to motivate, even if we knew we were only going to make a little bit of progress and get stormed off in the afternoon. But we were able to make little bits of progress, and I was able to do the crux pitch. I led that pitch first, and then Jesse followed, and then we got stormed off, and Matt had to do it the following day. But when he did that, we knew we were within blasting distance of hanging camp, and so we kind of packed up some bags from Sun Terrace with the intention of pushing to hanging camp and then staying there for the rest of the time on the wall. So I'd say about a little over a week, we were able to all free the crux. We all led the crux pitch and then free the rest of the pitches up to hanging camp. So now we're like at 2/3 height on the wall.
Shit.
And I can't tell you like how, I know we're getting long on this thing. I was trying to keep it concise.
We're all right.
It's hard when there's so much info.
Yeah, there's a lot. But this is a huge experience. We're all right.
But I like can't stress how like used to getting stormed on we were. Like normally when I'm in Yosemite, if it starts raining, I'm like, all right, time to go home. You know what I mean? Like, but when you're up there and you're like in it, there's no choice. You're like, all right, well, it's raining, but or it's wet, but I'm like still gonna try and climb this pitch. And I'm like, yeah, I can't feel my toes, and my chalk bag's like full of water, but I guess we're here and we're gonna try. I'm like busting out Gore-Tex shell and Gore-Tex pants and like in and out of big down jackets and gloves and mountain boots, just like, and going across snow and jugging up in the snow and rappelling in the snow and just like, oh, it's splitter for a few hours, sick, we're rock climbing as normal. And then like, okay, now we're like freezing in our tents, and it's like, I've never experienced anything like that, and I didn't think that it was possible to still kind of make progress in those conditions. But if you're motivated and you make it happen, it is more possible than you might think.
And what are you wearing on your feet when you're doing this? Are you wearing like TC Pros or is it too cold?
Yeah, TC Pros and socks. It's not as cold. It's not as cold as you would think, I would say.
So tell me about where you all were at, or where you specifically were at, just emotionally, this many weeks in. And it sounded like the progress, while you were getting hammered by some storms and there was a little bit of a sufferfest, or maybe a lot of a sufferfest, the progress was coming incrementally enough where you weren't losing the psych, or were there some kind of bleak times in there?
There are definitely some bleak times. I mean, I was trying my hardest to stay positive and optimistic and living in the moment, and just like I said, trying to get as much progress done as we possibly could. And so I'd say, like, after hanging out in that full storm and making slow progress, getting stormed off each day, like, it wasn't looking super promising. And so, yeah, we were definitely like struggling and having some low moments. And yeah, I mean, the summit just felt so far off and felt so like unattainable and felt so unpredictable that I can't say any of us were really thinking we were going to like truly pull it off until we got to hanging camp. Hanging camp was a big moment for us to know that, like, all right, we have the crux behind us. We're at the next camp. We're not going down until we have to go down, and we have essentially everything we need to take her to the top. We just need to climb like 8 more pitches of 512 or something, and then some few pitches of mixed climbing to the top, and then yeah, we can get out of there.
All right, y'all, just take a quick breather here in the midst of this amazing story with Jordan to shout out a couple rad sponsors who are offering you exclusive deals on their stuff, and they're also making this show possible. First off, PhysiVantage, the official climbing nutrition sponsor of The Struggle. Obviously, Jordan loves PhysiVantage. He brought it all the way up to 20,000 feet on Cowboy Direct, and it was helping to fuel the team there. Who else is it fueling? Well, from Daniel Woods to Paige Clausen, Jonathan Segrist to Natalia Grossman, the strongest fingers in the game are using PhysiVantage every day because it works. Now, one of my favorites that I use every day before I climb, or sometimes just do like a little finger work, like a no-hang on the hangboard, is their supercharged collagen. And I've been able to recover faster and stay healthier than I ever have, even as I train harder than I ever have. And this is all science-backed stuff, you guys, with 6 new peer-reviewed studies published in the last 2 years showing the effectiveness of collagen supplementation, including studies that found improvement in rate of force development, so that's like finger power, greater tendon hypertrophy and stiffness, improved joint functionality, and improved muscle recovery. I'll link to these studies in the show notes if you want to learn more, or you can just read up on it all over at physivantage.com. Give it a try. I think you're going to feel the difference like I have, and you can score 15% off by entering code STRUGGLE15 at checkout over at physivantage.com. This episode's also sponsored by the Kaya Climb app, and if you enjoy bouldering outdoors, this is the absolute best resource to add to your toolkit here. They've worked with local experts to create digital guidebooks for more than 50 top bouldering areas. I'm talking Bishop, Red Rock, Joe's, Squamish, Leavenworth, Rocky Mountain, and more being added all the time. It is right there on your phone with GPS-pinned boulders, beautiful photos, and accurate directions, even when you don't have a signal. No more wandering around the woods, wondering where that 5-star rig is, or looking for the stack of rocks that fell down. It's all right there in your hand. Plus, my favorite feature, over 300,000 community-uploaded beta videos for when you get shut down on the proj. And they've partnered with Access Fund to help protect the areas that we all love to climb. Just keeps getting better. Hit that link in your show notes to download a free version, and you can just try it all out. Plus, if you want to upgrade to the pro version, you get 20% off by using that link. It's like $5 a month for more than 50 guidebooks. It's crazy. Check it out. I love what Kai's doing. All right, let's get back to this conversation with Jordan. So just to check in kind of on what one goes into an expedition like this expecting, how important is it to summit? How important is it just to have a good time and try your best? How important is it to just say, hey, let's make it home uninjured and safe and this kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure. I think a really important thing that might often get overlooked is like you have to have the same level of commitment to the goal as your partners, because if everybody's suffering but one person is kind of like tapping out and no, like this is too much for me, I don't want to keep suffering at this level, I just want to hang out in camp, like that kind of screws the whole team. So you really all have to kind of be on the same page and have the same level of commitment, or like, no, we're going to do whatever it takes, no matter how hard or how uncomfortable it is in the moment. Like we all got to stick together and make it happen. So yeah, having a shared level of commitment is really important. And then yeah, I think speaking to the dynamic of our team, like we all had our strengths and our weaknesses and different things we brought to the team as a whole. But then on individual days, like there'd be days that I woke up feeling really shitty and Matt and Jesse were feeling good, and they took more of the work or whatever and pushed for the team, and vice versa. So everybody kind of rose to the occasion when needed or when called upon, relative to the other two who might not have been feeling as good or as psyched or strong or confident or whatever. I think it's Jesse who said this. I had really low expectations going in, just because you don't want to get super high hopes thinking like, yeah, we're just gonna go send the NAR first trip to Pakistan. It's gonna be totally casual. Everything's gonna go our way.
Right.
That's just not how it works. So I had low expectations. Everybody kept asking me like, oh man, are you psyched to go to Pakistan? I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm probably just gonna, like I said, get sick and poop in my tent and not climb anything and endure a lot of bad weather, and then we'll go home. Right. So that was kind of like what I had expected. And if you have the lowest expectations, anything beyond that, you're going to be happy with. So, but then as well, really the priorities going into a trip like this, I think, should be, and are for a lot of people, is come home alive first and foremost. None of us want to die in the mountains, so make decisions accordingly. Number two, come home better friends than when you started. You don't want to go on a trip and get in arguments with your best friends that you come home and go separate ways. That can impact your relationship in a negative way. So you want to come home friends, ideally better friends than when you started, having gone through an awesome experience together. And then three, come home with the summit. And then I'd say four, considering the objective we were trying, is come home with a summit and a successful free climb attempt. So those were our priorities going in. And I had low hopes of being able to free climb the wall, but I said at the beginning, I was like, at the very least, I want to stand on top of this mountain. I don't want to like try and free climb all these pitches below and never see the top. So
right.
We were fortunate enough to be able to do all four. And so the most successful I think we could be, and obviously we came home alive. We're all way better friends. We had an incredible summit day and mostly free ascent. We can get into that, but yeah, a free ascent. So
sick. Well, let's pick up where we left off here, which is you made it to hanging camp, and that's when, for the first time, maybe in a little while, it started to seem like, hell yeah, you could do this thing. You're within striking distance, 8 pitches, the hardest pitches below you. So talk me through what happened once you were up there on hanging camp, how it came together from there.
Yeah, we got there like late afternoon and set up, and this is where it actually started to feel like we're big wall climbing now, as we're like setting up the portaledges for the first time. We're stringing ropes so that we can like tram across with our daisy chains and whatnot, and we're like setting up our whole scene. And we have like this little ledge. It's kind of like a mini El Cap tower that we're able to sit on to cook and everything. And then epic views. We're starting to get higher up on the wall now because the mountains all around us are huge. And for the most part, you're like always looking up at them. And now we're kind of starting to be kind of level with them, being like on the horizon. And so the views were incredible. And then honestly, looking up at the route was good up to there. There are a lot of quality pitches, a lot of just like whatever pitches here and there. But then from hanging camp to the top, it legitimately looked like we were standing at the base of Moonlight Buttress. And it was just like incredible Sick. Splitter cracks and like amazing granite and steep and exposed and just like, outrageous, the kind of shit that you dream about. So it was really exciting place to be. We had a great first night there. And then woke up in a snowstorm, and we were like, "Oh, bummer!" Like we were really hoping we were going to be able to like hit the ground running our first morning at hanging camp, but we didn't. We hung out like all afternoon, And we were kind of like, oh, is the weather splitting? Is it not? It was kind of going back and forth. And eventually I was like, fuck it. I don't even care. I'm just going to aid climb this pitch. The next pitch was like a 12 plus crack. And so I aided this pitch, and then the weather started to improve. And I was like, Matt, are you willing to jug up here? I'm actually feeling pretty good. I think I might try this next pitch. And what we learned, like we had intended to swap leads more traditionally, but there were certain times where like, if you're in climbing mode, it's easier to stay in climbing mode and your belayer to stay in belay mode and not have to go in and out of your mountain boots and your gloves and your jackets and all that stuff.
Sure.
So if like somebody was feeling it, like they would lead however many pitches until they weren't feeling it, knowing that the other people are going to have similar moment at some point on the climb. And so I had a moment that day. I aided this pitch, asked Matt to come up and jug and belay me on the next one. And then I was like, Jesse, you should rally and you should start micro tractioning that first pitch and get beta and like chalk holds and whatnot and see if you can do it and we can follow. And so, yeah, I led this next 512 splitter pitch. That was like one of the best pitches of my life. I was able to on-site that. And then there was another 512 pitch afterwards that legitimately looked like 510. It was like a left-facing kind of flake layback thing, but it was listed on the pitch or on the topo as 512. I was like, oh, that'll be no problem. And so I'm like, Matt, I think I'm gonna do this pitch too. And I start, and this was like one of the hard, not the hardest pitch on the route, but it took the most effort for me in the moment. It starts with a little traverse off the anchor, like down and right, maybe 15 feet or something. And then this crack starts. And from the belay, looking at it, you can see like 10 feet up into the anchor, it's like a good crack, like 0.4, 0.5, 0.75 layback kind of thing. But then below, you can't see that there's actually no crack at the start of it. It's just like a rounded flare. And so you can't get any gear. And then I get to the base, I'm like, oh fuck, like actually no, this is like legit 512 for sure. And I'm like, oh, and there's no gear, but I'm like kind of on top ropes. The belay is over here, but if I fall, I'm going to take this like weird swing and hit this ledge and potentially get hurt. So it was like fairly serious, but I knew I just had to bust like the first 5-10 feet and then it would get easier. And yeah, so I commit to it, and it's way harder than I think. And I'm like fighting to stay in there. I'm just like resisting a barn door and yeah, looking like I'm going to take this really bad fall. And then it starts snowing on me conveniently. And so I'm like in the thick of it, and I finally get up high enough, make it through the crux, and I'm able to place some gear. And then it was like legit 12 minus or 11 plus, like really strenuous layback crack climbing with not many feet on the side, and you're just like fighting it the whole time. And yeah, that took it out of me, but it was one of my prouder efforts. And so I was able to, do on-site these 2 512 pitches and get the rope up, fix the rope up 3 pitches higher on a day that looked like we weren't going to climb at all. And the following day I was like, all right, Matt and Jesse, it's your turn. Like I just led these 3 512 pitches. Like I need to take the back seat for a little bit. And so yeah, they like followed my leads to catch up and then push the ropes a little bit higher. And we were thinking we were going to summit that day, because just after that we had 3 more pitches of 512 or something and a 5.9 maybe, and then 5 pitches of mixed climbing to the top. And I don't know why we thought we could summit that day. Like it was way farther, way farther than we thought. And yeah, so Matt and Jesse led the next few pitches, and the route finding was hard and the climbing was hard, and I was just in the back seat. And same thing kind of happened. Like I followed a pitch up to this ledge, and they were all hanging out, and it was Matt's lead on the next one, and he started up and backed off. He was like, I don't think I got this. This is hard and kind of scary and fucked. And turns out he was actually not on the right pitch. We figured it out later, but psychologically he was a little spent. Jesse was kind of spent, and I had another moment where the torch was passed to me, like, all right, Jordan, you have to lead this 12 plus pitch right now, or like we go down. And I was like, all right, fuck yeah, this is my moment, I guess. I've been following all day, like I can take the lead. I was like, well, do we want to summit today or do we not? And we were like trying to summit. And so I had another moment. Thankfully I was actually feeling really good in comparison to them. for whatever reason. And so I referenced Ted Lasso. You seen Ted Lasso?
Oh yeah.
Jesse and I had both seen it a number of times, but Matt started watching it on the trip. And when he told us that, we were like, oh, dude, yeah, let us know when you get to the dart scene. You know, the scene when there's in the bar and he's playing darts with Rupert.
Yeah.
And he has the whole, like, he basically plays Rupert, making him think that he doesn't know how to play darts and cons him in the end. And right before he throws, like, the game-winning bullseye, he just says, barbecue sauce. And confidently wins. And that's how I felt. That's how I felt really good starting up this pitch. And the crux was kind of obvious. I could tell where it was. And as I was like chalking up, like getting ready to fire into the crux, I looked down at Matt and Jesse and I say, barbecue sauce. And then I sent the pitch and it was sick.
Yes.
That was it. Yeah, that was a really fun moment.
Dude, that's magic right there. Holy shit. I love it. I love this. And so that was, you only had a handful of, what was it, 3 pitches after that and then some mixed stuff to the top, but you had to lower it back down to hanging camp for the final push.
Yeah, well, we were still kind of thinking that maybe we would summit that day, but yeah, Matt followed that pitch clean. Jesse heartbreakingly fell at the very end, and then we had a 5-9 pitch, and then the last 5-12 pitch on the whole route before the easy mix climbing to the top.
Got it.
And the whole time on the topo, it says like 12A, like corner, and Jesse's a great corner climber and he's known for his stemming ability. And so the whole time we were like, Jesse, that's your pitch. And he was like, fuck yeah, I'm fired up. So the whole time we thought that was going to be Jesse's pitch. But since he fell on like the 5-12 corner or finger crack I just described, it kind of changed the order a little bit. Matt led the 5-9 pitch, and then that put me at the base of this 12A corner as Jesse had to like lower down and redo this pitch again, second try.
Right.
But it was so late in the day at this point, I was like, are we trying to summit? No. Like, it's very clearly like we're not. And the pitch was like, had, frozen ice on the wall, like just a thin sheet of ice over the face, like where you're laybacking and pacing your feet and whatnot. So I was like, all right, we're going to fix the rope here. We're going to go back down to hanging camp. And tomorrow is going to be our summit day. We all just have to jug up however many pitches, like it was actually like a lot of jugging, free this last 12A corner, and then climb 5 pitches to the top. And so, yeah, we wrapped back down to hanging camp and had a great night there. And then honestly woke up super early, like at 4 a.m. to the most splitter weather we had on the entire trip. Like I woke up and poked my head outside my portaledge, and to my right was a full moon setting basically to a perfectly clear sky with stars still out. And then to my left, the sun just like slowly starting to come up over K2, literally to my left. And I just remember yelling to Matt and Jesse, I was like, wake up, like it's fucking splitter. This is gonna be the best day ever. And
oh my God, dude, I love this.
And yeah, I have a video I'm waiting to share. It's like my favorite video I took on the whole trip is, yeah, panning from the moon to the head wall, to the sun rising over K2, to like the moon shadow of the Trango Tower on the valley below. Incredible.
Oh, dude, what absolute magic. So was this...
Time was really closing.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Was this essentially the last day you would have had to have summited before just needing to back off in order to hit your timeline?
It was, yeah. It kind of worked out just perfectly, because this was our 11th day on the wall, and well, this is the main crux, which leads into the weight loss thing later, is that I think our first day at hanging camp, or maybe the day after, we took an inventory of our food. And up to this point, you just have stuff sacks full of dinners and breakfasts and bars for the day and additional snacks and things like that. And you kind of just pull out of it whenever you want. And we realized that, okay, we can't do that anymore. We're running out of food. We need to divide it all up and each have an individual ration. And so we had the really depressing round table where we dumped out all of our food, like the remaining oatmeals for breakfast and peanut butter packets and bars and even dinners at night and soups and things, and divided it all up. And we're like bartering, like, okay, no, I want that bar for this flavor, and getting like the best deal that we each were happy with. And it was really, I've never had to do that before. So it was, yeah, wasn't my favorite, wasn't my favorite thing. And then
Is this where the wheels came off of the relation? Because you said one of the goals is to return as better friends, but like, did somebody take the flavor bar you wanted, and now shit gets real?
no, no, not at all. Actually, it was totally fair. I think this just speaks more to perhaps my lack of self-control or maybe Matt and Jesse's experience with this kind of thing. But I basically did not ration my bars very well over the remaining days at hanging camp. So much so that the day before that I described where we thought we were maybe going to summit, but ended up not, I like ate all of my bars. Because I was like, this is it. This is our summit day. I need energy. We're gonna go, and that's perhaps why I felt really good and why Matt and Jesse bonked, and I was able to push it a few pitches higher. But yeah, that ultimately did not pay out for me because that night, I mean, I think we maybe had soup for dinner. Matt and Jesse maybe had a little bit more, and then the whole summit day I went without any food.
Wow.
I think Jesse was kind enough to give me a bar at some point in the day, I remember. But yeah, got back to camp and had some hot fizz advantage or something to drink. So yeah, I put all my eggs in the basket the day before that we were summiting and therefore didn't need any food left. Although I also didn't consider the fact that like we had a whole like 2-day descent to get back to advanced base camp
Yeah.
for where we had like any remaining food. Because the whole time when we were like packing bags and bringing food up there incrementally and with among other supplies, Jesse kept like looking at our inventory being like, dude, there's no way we're going to eat all this food. And we ate all of our fucking food. And then we needed more actually.
Wow.
So we ended up like the day that we hiked to the base of the wall to officially start our push, we left a little bit behind at advanced base camp and would have been nice to have on the wall, but thank God we at least had something to come back to halfway.
So you cut it close with the food,
Cut it
but you
close,
also
yeah.
got incredibly lucky, it sounds like, on that last day with the weather. This was your last opportunity to summit. You got a splitter day, and you felt good enough to make that push. Now, you only had, it was one 5-12 pitch, then some 5-9, and some exit climbing, right? So maybe just talk me through a bit of how those final pitches went and just where your head game was at, where you were at emotionally. And of course, we all want to hear about what it was like to stand on top.
Yeah, so actually this day started out on the physical and emotional high with the quality of the weather and not having to wait super long in the morning to get going, because basically if the sun's not out, it's really hard to get going because it's too cold. So started out really good, and then I had my low point. I'd say Matt and Jesse, we all had a distinct low point at some point during our whole climb. Jesse maybe earlier on, Matt in the middle perhaps, and then me here at the very end. And yeah, so we jugged all of our lines and pulled up our ropes to push to the summit as we had fixed our lead lines and static line and things. And yeah, it was my turn to lead this pitch. And we get up there, and although it's perfect weather, that ice that I talked about from the night before is now melting, and the pitch is pretty wet. No more wet than anything else I had climbed up to there at that point. And so I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, okay, it's like great condition. Yeah, maybe it's a little wet, but it's a corner I can lay back and climb through, no big deal. And the pitch kind of breaks up into two parts. There's like a lower corner bit and then an upper corner bit and a no hands ledge in between. And I kind of started up and it was wet and no big deal. But then it started like literally running water where I'm starting to lay back and water's like going down my arm and into my like my shirt and my pants, and that's where
Shit.
it hit me. I was like, okay, I can't rest through here. I gotta punch it. And I made it through that first crux to the no hands ledge, and it was like, whoa, like that was like a tough warm up. And the corner above looked easier from a climbing perspective, more straightforward corner climbing, but more wet because there's a slab at the top of the left side of the corner and a slab at the top of the right side of the corner, both with two hanging snow fields of ice. and snow that was just melting. And so one of them was like melting water straight down the crack, and then the other one was melting water straight down the face that you're smearing on.
Right.
And so I made it maybe 2/3 up, like almost to the end of the pitch, to what's probably the upper crux, and I just slipped, like just chalking up. Something. I was like, oh, bummer. Because up to this point, I mean, I did the crux pitch like second try, and of course I had to aid some 511 pitches in the snow or whatever, but everything I had free climbed up to this point, like I'd essentially on-sighted or flashed. And so I was like feeling pretty good. That was the first like whipper of the trip, I guess you could say.
Wow.
For myself. And yeah, so I fall, and then I just go into get the rope to the top of the pitch kind of mode, and then I just start like falling and falling and falling, because it just gets wetter and wetter and harder at the top than it looks. And it's bolted because it's like a flared crack, and so you can't aid climb it. And so I'm hanging there, and I'm just getting like extremely wet and uncomfortable and frustrated, and like water's dripping all the way down my rope to the belay, and like water's dripping off my shoes, and I'm just like completely wet and starting to get cold and annoyed. Yeah. And so I get to the anchor finally, and I fix the rope, and I rappel back down. So I decided to pull up an ice axe and chip out all of the snow and ice. And what that did is essentially like unleash the dam of water on the rest of the pitch. It got way wetter in the moment, but in the long run seemed like it was gonna dry faster, but we just didn't have the time for it. So we were like, all right, well, we can't, it obviously doesn't make sense to try it now, and it doesn't make sense to wait. Let's like go push to the summit, and then we'll come back and we'll try and free climb it on our way down.
Right. And this is just because, just to pause for a second, this is because what your objective was, it was to try to do every single pitch totally free. Yeah. So that's what's always in the back of your head. The second goal to that, as you said, is to at least make sure you summit, regardless, whether it's shitty conditions or there's a time issue or a safety issue. So there's a few things interplaying, but at this point in time, you're saying, well, we're so close. This is like literally the last probably challenging pitch, right? The last thing that could potentially stop you. So you're saying it's not freeable right now. So let's tick the next objective, which is getting to the top. And then if we can free it later, then we can at least have done every single pitch. It's not necessarily a ground up objective.
Exactly. Yeah. It was kind of like an asterisk we were willing to take, because there was the possibility that we could hang out there all day, wait for it to dry. We all free this pitch, and then we don't have enough time to summit before the storm hits.
Right. That'd be terrible.
And so it's like that would have been like way less cool. So we decided we want to summit. And also it was like kind of annoying, because we experienced a lot of bad conditions and a lot of wetness, but it never like fully shut us down. And this was like full shutdown mode, and it was just this one pitch, and it was like the easiest of all the 512 pitches that would be no issue. We all would have on-sighted it or flashed it had it not been wet, but right. That's mountain climbing for you. And as you're getting closer to the top, that's where the mountain starts to round out, and therefore there's more ledges with snow and ice on it, and so it just got snowier as we got to the summit. So it was kind of should have perhaps been expected, but anyway. So we push on. I got really wet, so at the belay, I'm like, Matt, Jesse, you guys take over. I'm gonna follow as the third. And so Jesse switches into his Gore-Tex and busts out the ice axes and crampons and mountain boots, and he led us all the way to the summit, up the next 5 pitches. And so Jesse would lead, Matt would follow, and then I would follow. So as I'm like following one pitch, Jesse's off leading the next pitch. Right, there's some overlap there. And so I had spent the entire time at this belay while Jesse led the first snow and ice pitch, just like drying out and getting warm and getting comfy, because I was really, really uncomfortable.
Sure.
And trying to prepare for the rest of the day. And then as soon as I start, I'm like, okay, I'm like getting ready to go, and I start trying to ice climb, like my very first pitch, and I can't even see Matt and Jesse. They're like up and above over this like roof or something, this ledge I can't see. And I start climbing. I'm like getting in my groove and whatnot, and it's not that bad. And then all this snow and ice starts raining down, and I have my Gore-Tex jacket on, but my hood is down, and all the snow goes right down my fucking neck, like all the way down to my pants. And I'm just like, oh. And I finished climbing the pitch, and I essentially threw a hissy fit, is what we would describe it as. I was so annoyed. I was like, man, I just got warm, I just got dry, and now I'm like all wet again, and this is really uncomfortable. And I was like trying to pull on my down pants, and I'm like walking across this snow ledge, and I'm like tripping on my down pants and my crampons, and like feathers are flying everywhere, and it was just a disaster. So I kind of hit my emotional and physical low point there.
Yeah.
And Jesse was just like in fast alpine summit mode, so he just kept charging, and I kind of just kept trudging along behind until I eventually got to this point where I could see the sun was like about to go around the mountain and leave us for the rest of the day. And there was a little ledge, and so I took advantage. I was like, this is my time. I really need to dry out and get comfortable, or the rest of the day is going to be pretty miserable. And if you're like shivering and I don't have any food, I'm wasting way more energy than I have. So yeah, I had a moment where I like took all my stuff off and laid it out, and Jesse's on top of the next pitch while Matt is following, and he's like, Jordan, like, you think you could speed it up there, bud? And I'm like, Jesse, I appreciate it, but I need a minute. You don't understand how wet I got. I need a second. Otherwise I'm not going to be able to keep going. So ended up being no issue. I caught up to them, no problem, once I got my stuff back on. And then we had one false summit moment where Jesse's, the top's like right there, and then he gets to the top and he's like, never mind, it's 2 more pitches. We're like, oh fuck. and yeah, we're like full on. There was one really cool pitch actually where it was like a 5-10 crack to this chimney with all this ice in the back, and you're like climbing like this chimney and arm barring and swinging an ice axe in the back.
Sick.
Like ice in the back. It was really cool. But yeah, all pretty alpine. We were in like mountain boots and crampons most of the time, and full Gore-Tex and everything. And yeah, Jesse led the last summit pitch, which is really kind of complicated and obvious where to go. There's a big hanging snow and ice mushroom guarding the top that we had to figure out a way to navigate. And Jesse kind of ended up doing a roundabout way to get to the summit that wouldn't have been possible for us to follow safely. So he kind of did this loop around and then dropped a rope down so we could kind of go more direct.
Right.
And so you're kind of like using your crampons on the little edges and the crack, and then hammering your ice axe into the corner. There's a little seam and like underclinging, and it was weird, but you kind of just like muckle your way up there. But yeah, we had a moment on the summit. I mean, I was up there the least amount of time. Jesse was up there first, Matt second, and then myself. And yeah, dude, it's pretty sick up there. I mean, to have looked up at these mountains the whole time, kind of like when you're in Yosemite and you just feel like you're surrounded by giants, but to actually like if you climb Half Dome in Yosemite and you're standing on top of one and you're like looking above at the whole valley for the whole time, that's kind of what it feels like, but with K2 next to you and the big, incredibly huge mountains. And yeah, it was way more emotional than I expected it to be honest. I think because you're living so much in the moment up to the summit day, you can't really think much farther beyond like where you currently are to focus on the task at hand. And so it's kind of always this far off thing, but then when the summit day actually comes, it still feels really far off until you're actually like one pitch below and you're like, holy shit, and that's the top right there. We're almost there. Then you can let your mind to like start to accept the fact that, yeah, we're actually gonna climb this thing. And so yeah, that's where the whole reflection on the whole journey and the difficulties to get up to get there, and the unlikelihood of what we were doing, and yeah, how narrow of a window we had to pull it off in the end. And yeah, so it was all a bit emotional for us just to have succeeded as a team and to have ultimately had a really good, strong bonding experience. But then Matt and Jesse each had their own like individual things packed into it. Jesse had brought the remainder of Hayden Kennedy's ashes that he spread on the summit that he had been spreading all over the world for the past few years since he passed, but this was like the last of it. And Jesse described that before then, him spreading the ashes was for himself, but then on the top, the last of it was for Hayden, and it was a big closure moment for him to be ready to do that. So that was cool. We all got to finish spreading Hayden's ashes.
Beautiful.
Because he loved Pakistan. He did a bunch of expeditions there. And then Matt, our trip leader, he had the whole idea originally to climb this route from his good friend and mentor, Micah Dash, who they climbed together a bunch. They climbed El Cap together, and Micah had done an expedition to Pakistan and heard about the Trango Tower and the Cowboy Direct, and went back to Matt and was like, we should do this route. And then shortly after he passed on another expedition. And so this trip was a big thing for Matt to kind of still go after that and fulfill Micah's vision and do it for himself. So there was that whole thing. And then I kind of had my own personal emotion wrapped up in the idea of whether or not I was capable of something like this, kind of based on things I had bought into believe or told to believe from a young age about gay people specifically, and like how stereotypically gay people are not very tough and they're generally pretty feminine and they don't do hard things, blah, blah, blah. And not having a representative, any or much representation of gay big wall alpine climbers kind of thing.
Right.
I kind of had a moment of proving that those beliefs wrong in my head, not only for myself, but then hopefully for other people after the fact. And so that was powerful for me, and that made me feel really proud. And so, yeah, we just kind of hugged it out and enjoyed the scenery for maybe honestly 5 to 10 minutes. It's weird to only be up there for that long. And then we started our descent.
God, dude. Well, I mean, first of all, congratulations. What an accomplishment. What an incredible feat, like physical, mental, emotional, tactical feat. But how beautiful. Thanks for sharing not only your personal story there, but just representing Matt and Jesse's as well, to make something like that more deeply meaningful. And I'm sure there's plenty of meaning in it, just in terms of an incredible objective out in nature and pushing yourself to the limit, but then to have some deeper motivation and satisfaction behind it is so cool and so beautiful, and it worked out, which is crazy considering all that you went through. So yeah,
that does not pass on me. We definitely, I mean, we took advantage and we tried hard, but we also got lucky at the same time, and that often doesn't happen. So feel very fortunate considering first expedition. I kind of feel like Alex going to Patagonia for the very first time and like climbing the Fitz Traverse. You're like, that doesn't really happen. Most people don't go to the Karakoram for the first time and walk away with a successful ascent like this. So I'm really happy that I scored big and had a great time with Betsy. Summit is only part of it, getting down.
Let's talk about that for a second, because there's so much glory, and typically the movie ends on the summit and the helicopter pulls away and everybody's just got their arms in the air or whatever. But then like you've got 3,000 vertical feet and a ton of fixed lines and 2 camps and all this gear and everything, and a ticking clock on when your flight is going to be leaving, and you haven't eaten in 40 hours. So what is the postscript to the summit? Give me the kind of the high level view of just what it means to go from completing this improbable objective to then not getting to just take a zip line straight into a hot tub, which is what I would want to do, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh, that is definitely what we were talking about. We were like, we wish there was just a big zip line going straight to base camp. Hike down that godforsaken gully. Well, I think in mountaineering, like high altitude mountaineering, climbing Everest or K2 or something like that, the summit is maybe only like halfway there because you have to get back down safely, and that's where a lot of accidents and deaths happen.
Sure.
I'd say for ours, it was maybe like the summit was like 70 or 80%. So we didn't have as much, and it was way easier to get down considering we did have to do a ton of rappels, but on the bottom, like we had some fixed ropes, but rappelling, we were not just zipping down fixed lines. We're like we're rappelling with our fixed lines and the tag line, and like simultaneously cleaning 1,000 feet of rope off the wall. And so that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah. But that's also familiar
But
territory for you. I mean, part of your
yeah,
tactical expertise that you bring in are these big wall tactics on how to efficiently clean and haul the hell out of there, right?
for sure. It just takes time and effort. And so yeah, Jesse led the rappels back down the alpine terrain that he essentially guided us up to the top of the 512 corner again. And at this point it was nighttime. And yeah, he was like, okay, you go down first now. So I fixed the rope and I went down to assess how wet the pitch was and whether or not we were going to be able to free climb it. Because it was a little weird to have this summit high moment, but then be like, all right, not only do we have to get down, but we have to also still kind of perform for a second and try and send this pitch. And so I went down on it and I was like, well, it's certainly drier than it was, but it's like still a little wet and it's like starting to snow. So like we got to hustle. And Matt and Jesse hadn't climbed on it at all yet. And I had just led it that one time to get the rope up. So I mostly knew what to do. So I wrapped down and I fixed the rope, and yeah, we decide that I'm gonna try and just micro traction it. It seems outrageous to try and lead climb it right now, considering the condition of it already, but the fact that Matt and Jesse also have to do it, where time was really of the essence, and Jesse particularly was concerned about us just being exposed to the storm for that long, and already being in the night and having all this work ahead of us. So yeah, I just pulled on my shoes and put on my chalk bag. I hardly had any chalk left, and I'm like free climbing in full Gore-Tex. And I decided to, since I free climbed the beginning of the pitch initially to that no hands ledge I talked about, I just jugged up to that no hands ledge with the intention of micro tractioning the rest of it to the top. And while I was at the ledge, I short fixed the rope again so that Matt could start micro tractioning, figuring out the first half of the pitch below me. And so I did it. I was able to climb the rest of the pitch on micro traction or top rope. And yeah, ideally we wanted every pitch of the route to have been led at some point by one person on the team. If one person leads it clean, then the other two can top rope it, kind of thing. And that was the one pitch that didn't get like a full free lead, I guess. I led it when I like got the rope up, but whatever. So I was happy with that. I was like, all right, we did it, kind of thing. And then that was falling on the first pitch or the first half. And eventually it was just like, he's like, dude, I don't got this. This is so dumb. And Jesse was like, I agree. If you pull it, like I will pull the plug, I won't even try it. And I was like, well, at the very least, we can claim a free ascent for all of us up to this one pitch and then a team free ascent because I was the one that was able to do it.
Right.
And not because they weren't able to do it. If, like I said, and I don't want it to come across that way. If it had turned out to be like Matt's lead or Jesse's lead and not mine, each of them would have done the same thing. They would have gone up on the pitch. They would have gotten the rope up. I wouldn't have gotten to try it. It would have been in the same situation. So it was really...
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing is honestly the fact that you stopped and you were like, yeah, let's go ahead and give this pitch a go. It's nighttime. You've been soaking all day. You haven't eaten. You were already on the summit. Honestly, I guess there's a certain kind of ethic that's maybe deep down inside you who are professional climbers where maybe it had some extra drive or meaning. But for somebody like myself, it just seems like, yeah, fucking just keep rapping down, man. You guys did it. But I my hat's off to you for even stopping and being like, hey, yeah, let's give this a go. It's snowing. It's still wet. It's nighttime. And you're still willing to be like, well, let's see if we can just do this pitch again. I can't even imagine how unmotivated I would have been to try to do that.
I agree. And I'm glad to hear you say that because, yeah, we don't want this one aspect to take away from an entire 6 weeks of effort. And the style is like a little different than Yosemite, for example. Yosemite does set a standard that can be applied elsewhere, but it doesn't always apply perfectly. Yosemite, it's really easy to just try again like the following day or the next week or whatever. It's not that easy to put together another 6-week expedition to Pakistan to go free this 112A pitch at the top. It's you do the best you can, and at the end of the day, like as long as you're happy with your ascent and you're honest about what you did, which we have been entirely. So
Yeah, I mean, look, from where I'm sitting, you guys did the thing. And you even tried to do more than the thing on your way down, which is mind-boggling to me. You're
this thing, I was like, oh my God, free climbing is so stupid. I can't believe I'm about to try this pitch right now. It was absurd, Ryan. Like they say the best moments to take a photo or a video is like when you don't want to pull out your camera. That's when you should. And we could not. I wish we had footage of that moment because it was horrendous. There are so many moments like that. Some of them in which we were able to motivate to pull out our phones and take photos or whatever. But honestly, a lot of the time our phones were dead, so we missed out on a bit. But yeah, that'll stay with me forever probably.
This begs the question here: why?
Why?
Yeah.
I don't know. Part of what I like about big wall climbing and just big climbing days in general is I kind of like the feeling of being totally crushed and like stumbling back home and just like barely being able to get into bed and just utter fatigue, even though you feel so pathetic and helpless in the moment and you're like just kind of whining the whole time. I kind of love that because I don't know, it means that you put forth a good effort and hopefully did something rad or tried to do something rad and learned something and had a lot of fun in the process. So why? I mean, I don't know. Because it's fucking cool. That's why.
Man, is there a better answer to the question of why we do this than that? I just do not think so. Such huge respect and admiration for what those guys accomplished and also for what Jordan continues to contribute to our sport and our community. Man, I hope you all enjoyed this one as much as I did. And if you want more, and I know you do, the extended version of this episode is just packed with bonus content. There's like 20 more minutes of it, including what Jordan describes as his second breaking point and the hardest part of the expedition, the hell of getting off the mountain in a snowstorm, kicking Alex Honnold's haul bag down the gully. It's a great little story. The gnarly thing that happened to their hands and their feet as they started to descend, what the team did to pamper themselves, much deserved, in Islamabad, and so much more. That's usually behind a membership paywall, but right now you can access those amazing stories for free with a Patreon or Apple subscriptions trial. It'll also give you free access to the entire library of Pro Clinic episodes, including Jordan's on Big Wall Tactics. You'll get uncut videos and all the other bonus content that's out there. I'll keep hustling over here in the podcast/utility closet to put out banger stuff. You can check it all out. Hit those links in your podcast player, or just swing by patreon.com/The Struggle Climbing Show to sign up for free. Now, something you definitely have to do right now is go check out Jordan's incredible posts and stories about this expedition on Cowboy Direct over on his Instagram, @CannonJTC. He's done an amazing job putting visuals and videos to everything that he talked about here in this interview. So I highly recommend that. And if you're not already, please follow this show @The Struggle Climbing Show. Huge thanks and appreciation to our show sponsors who have brought you this episode at zero cost. Scarpa, Fizzy Vantage, and the Kaya Climb app. Y'all are the best. Check your show notes right now in your podcast player there for links and special discounts from those guys that are only available to Struggle listeners. All right, y'all, that clips the anchors on this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now, if you're a patron or subscriber, listen through the outro music here at the end, and that is when your bonus content will begin. And hey, if you want even more Struggle content and a free sticker, free sticker time, sign up for the Struggle newsletter. You can just pop over to thestruggleclimbingshow.com, fill in your email address. I only send out like 1 or 2 emails a month, and it has some cool stuff and secret deals in there. So if you like cool stuff and secret deals, then check it out. Hey, did you know that The Struggle is carbon neutral in partnership with the Honnold Foundation? Well, they are doing amazing work to bring clean energy to communities around the world. You can get inspired by their latest grant recipients over at honnoldfoundation.org. Toss them some love if you can. They are truly doing impactful work out there. And lastly, The Struggle is a proud member of the Plugtone Audio Collective, a diverse group of the best, most impactful podcasts in the outdoor industry. This show was produced and hosted by me, Ryan Devlin. I hope your training and climbing are going great, and if you are struggling out there like I am struggling out here, well, just remember, the struggle makes us stronger. See you soon.